Once you have your mat loaded, like we just saw, we're going to go ahead and hit continue here on the screen, and it's going to try and connect to the actual Cricut machine. You'll want to make sure the Cricut is on at this point. If it is not on before you hit continue and it starts trying to connect, it may cause issues. And what should happen is you should see the light turn blue when it connects, and it should say up here at the top, Venture Bluetooth. If it doesn't, you'll either want to make sure the machine is plugged in and on, or you may need to click on the Connect Machine menu and see if that pops up as an option. And now we are at the Materials Selection page, and we will do each step one by one. So in this case, we would be using either copy paper, so we would select whichever material matches what we're using. Here at the top, you should see commonly used ones. If you hit Browse All, you can see a full list of everything Cricut thinks that it can work with. The library does not have the correct tools to cut all of these materials, so there are materials on this list that we are not able to assist with, but we should be able to help out with everything here on the vinyl list, on the paper list, on the iron-on list, and on the cardstock list. Things not on that list, things on the fabric, the foam, the leather, some of these other lists, we may not be able to accommodate. So you should double check that before you go out and purchase your material. Once you have found the item you're using, in this case we're going to use copy paper, we're going to go ahead and hit select it and hit done. Also at this point, you can change the pressure. So if you are wanting maybe something that's going to cut through a little thicker, you have extra thick copy paper, you may want to set pressure to a little higher. Or if you have a particularly thin material that you're a little worried about tearing, you may want to set that to less pressure. The other thing to note here is if you select vinyl, specifically an iron-on, if you select vinyl iron-ons, it's going to change a couple of settings. It's going to pop up a little notice that says make sure mirror is turned on and iron-on material is face shiny side down. So if you are using iron-ons in particular, that does change the loading process a little bit. But for everything else, you want your material to be face up, or the side that you want facing you when it's the finished product facing up on the cutting mat. But going back to our paper, you could see it's taken us on to step 2, which will be physically loading the machine, and we'll just follow these steps. So we've talked about setting up your design in Cricut Design Space. You can see our laptop right here with our design pulled up that we were just looking at, and we're going to go ahead and talk about loading and running that design. So we're going to go ahead and hit continue, and we'll see that it's going to start to connect here. So you can see the machine's going to go ahead and connect. And because this white light, well, it just turned blue because I was a little too slow. This light was white, indicating that it was on, and it is just now turned blue, indicating that it is connected via Bluetooth to our laptop. So that's really the thing you want to look for at this point. And now we're at our material selection screen. We're going to be using copy paper just like we were before. Then it's going to pop up with our material load instructions just like we were looking at. And most of these you can ignore the first couple steps, because it's going to say we don't need a tool in clamp A, but it doesn't hurt anything to just leave the scoring tool there, so we're going to leave that B. And then it says make sure that fine point blade is in clamp B, which it is. And it should always be, so that shouldn't ever be something you have to worry about. And so then that brings us to raising this lever, making sure the pinch is set to 2, which it will be about 90% of the time. Unless you're doing a very narrow material, you're going to always just want this here, so you shouldn't normally need to move it. And then it's going to say make sure the guides are up, and those are these little blue things right here and here. If they happen to have been pushed down like so, you can just put a finger in, flip it up. It doesn't take a whole lot of effort. You do want to make sure the one in the middle is down, again, unless you're doing really narrow material. So this will be down about 90% of the time. And then that brings us to this button right here that is flashing. One of the things I really like about the Cricut is it does a great job of having the buttons that you need to press light up. So pushing that button releases our lever supports here. You will skip that step. You won't see that step appear in the instructions if you're doing rolls of smart vinyl from the back here. But since we're using the mats, we're going to take our mat. We're going to load it in, and most of the time, the little triangle here is going to be at the top. You're just going to slide it into the guides, just like so. And it should reach a point with these little feet out, because the lever's up, where it stops itself. So you can just slide it in till it stops. We push the lever down. And then, just like before, this button over here is going to start flashing, and that's going to be the measurement button, or the load button. So when I hit it, you're going to notice that the Cricut's going to load our material, do a little bit of measuring, make sure everything matches what it should. And if everything's done correctly, we should see this go button start to flash. If you have not done things correctly, if it thinks something's off, you will see an error pop up here on the screen. So if this button doesn't start flashing, keep an eye on the screen and it'll tell you what it thinks is wrong. This is also a good opportunity to double check that your material is still flat, especially if you're using something that has been used before. So if you're trying to get a little more out of something like this, which is great, it's a good use and helpful for sustainability, you may just start to see corners peel off, and you want to make sure that they're not going to get caught or pull your material out of place. But since right now we still look nice and flat, we're going to go ahead and hit go. There it goes. And this cut wasn't very long, so it is already finished. And because it's finished, all we have to do is flip the lever up, pull our mat out, and then I tend to put the lever down, but that's not strictly required. And then in this case, since we had some really small cuts, this will be really easy. We can just peel our paper up, and then if we look at our mat, those are our first 3 pieces of our card that we cut out. So fairly small, but we could then peel those up. We provide a couple of tools right here with the Cricut that can be helpful with that. The ones that I find most helpful are the spatula, the tweezers, especially if you're doing delicate things, if you're cutting out snowflakes, doilies, things that have a lot of really thin bits. The tweezers can be really helpful. Or the hook, which can be really helpful for just getting underneath pieces like so. Do be careful with this one because the end of the hook is sharp, so you don't want to poke yourself. But I find the hook the most helpful for getting underneath stuck pieces. And from there, we would hit next load, but then basically you repeat that process for each other color.